the years after the war ended in 1945, the Micronesian island of the Marshall Islands became a test site for nuclear and hydrogen bombs for the U.S. military. The United States conducted 67 nuclear explosive tests in the Marshall Islands between 1946 and 1958. The bombs have made whole indigenous islands uninhabitable until this day. Some islands don't even exist anymore. They were blown out of the ocean, out of existence. The radioactive fallout over the inhabited atolls have affected people of the nearby islands. The tests were tested on islands with people on them. They evacuated some of those peoples from their indigenous lands and now until today live on other lands, displaced from their homelands. These nuclear tests have devastated the Marshall Islands until this very day, and the people of the Marshall Islands face some of the highest rates, highest levels of cancers and other diseases from the radiation. Due to exposure to high radiation levels, there are many people today who die very young. Many babies were born to these families deformed, without hair. Their skin was literally falling off. Some babies were born and they were called jellyfish babies because they were on the operating table and they were moving because they were breathing, but they had no bones and no cartilage in their bodies. We know the damage and devastation that nuclear bombs have. We know the loss that any war brings. We are here with you so that we together can build this house together. In our culture, we build houses together. It's a community activity. And everybody comes together to build together this house. And it's not so much about the house as it's about the process of coming together. And so I ask all of us today, we are here so that we can build this house together, a house that respects the dignity of all members of the human race, no matter if you come from huge countries or you come from the small, tiny islands of the Pacific. A house that we build together for our children and their children, where they can be assured of a nuclear-free and war-free world. If we are commemorating and not taking steps to ensure the prosperity and the security of our future generations, then maybe we're doing nothing. I stand not to lecture you today, but to join you and to share with you and tell you in the island way, I feel you. Let us continue to write our history together so that this history may not be repeated, so that we can look forward with hope and take refuge in our shared humanity and love.
But I would like to say that I have been teaching for almost 70 years. I've been in Portland now for 26 years, and I have continued to teach, and I have several students, and one of my students will be performing today, and the dance is based on a 14th century Noh play, and it's a kabuki excerpt that she will be performing today, and it's about a girl or a dancer explaining the beautiful seashore of Suma in Japan, and her name is Joy Yuzuriha.
Conscientious Portlanders have been commemorating the sorrow of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and raising the issues of nuclear power and nuclear weapon proliferation for 53 years in a row. August 6, 2015 continues this tradition. The first such event, our local Grand Elder of Nuclear Protest, Carol I'm so bad at this, right? If you were German, I would say Urner, will tell you the first such event was August 6, 1962. Back then, the United States and the Soviet Union were at the brink of nuclear confrontation over the political division of Europe. Miss Urner, an organizer for Portland Women for Peace way back then, and an organizer for Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility today, will tell you how in 1962 both Cold War rivals were still determinately testing atomic weapons in the open atmosphere, in our shared air. Committed she was to begin local opposition to nuclear power. So Auntie Carol and her college classmates organized a walk around Portland approximating the area of Hiroshima neighborhoods, businesses, and workplaces incinerated by the detonation of that first atomic device 70 years ago. This is how change happens. It's in these civic activists, in these stubbornly persistent, patient aunties and uncles in our communities that change happens and happens and happens.
There was a lot to not be hopeful about because in part of the coup in Ukraine, which members of our government had engineered, and the reactions of Russia, and we were once again on the verge of, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it looked like when I got started back in the Berlin crisis, when the Berliners built the wall, and our generals were talking about nuclear war in response. They were ready to use these things. They'd been testing them in the Marshall Islands, and they were ready. I was a young mother of 31 with 2 small children. I wrote a letter to the Portland Reporter. I don't know if any of you remember that little paper. And it was printed with a 5-column headline, "A Mother's Eye View of Nuclear War." And the next day, women from all over Portland and men called me on the phone nonstop. And they were saying, "Carol, you sounded so hopeless in that letter." And they felt the same way. But we can't just be hopeless. Carol, we've got to do something. So they forced me to do something, and they did too. And we were young mothers with all that tiger energy that mothers have when their children are threatened. And we became dynamos, human dynamos, all day long, and dragging our sons and daughters with us out to visit the mayor, to parade down the street, to go to the civil defense people and tell them this is worthless. There's no shelter. Only peace is our shelter. Anyway, we did, as you say, help stop the nuclear testing in the Pacific. But we also wanted to get rid of nuclear weapons. We already wanted to abolish those things and end war. Well, now it's 53 years later, and 70 years since those 2 bombs were dropped. 70 years since the United Nations was formed. 70 years since the worst war in the history of the world ended, and terrible criminality and atrocities were committed by both sides in that war. We've heard about some of them tonight. And the atrocities have gone on. So, I said I wanted to talk about hope. And the first thing I want to talk about is the Iran deal, as we call it. Because now we have even more hope. People are criticizing it from both the right and the left. The left, they're saying, but it doesn't change anything. The nuclear powers still have their monopoly. They still have all their weapons. They've just stopped Iran, which apparently doesn't have any anyway, from having any. But it does a great deal. It shows that diplomacy, even diplomacy with someone you've been calling your enemy since 1953, even that diplomacy can work. You don't have to bomb everybody. It's much better to try to solve the problems, to listen to each other, to talk. And the Iranians have been trying to get us to listen, and Europe to listen and talk for years now. And we've done it, and we have the deal. It's not the end of the road, it's the very beginning. And there's a tremendous responsibility for us, for you and for me, because only we, the people, can make this hold, and can make the next step, and the next step, and push our governments the next step, and get rid of the nuclear weapons. And yes, Joe, get rid of war as well. I belong to Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I'll call us WILF part of the time, because we're a very old organization. And back in those days, in 1915, when we began, women in this country didn't even have the vote. But the world was at war, in a terrible, foolish war that should never have happened. The world had stumbled, or Europe had stumbled into that war just by posturing, like we've just been doing, playing nuclear chicken off the Russian border. But let's look at something else, and it's the humanitarian pledge that we've been sending around tonight. Last year, we did a petition to support the Marshall Islands, who have bravely sued all 9 nuclear powers in the world today, and taken that suit to the World Court. And we supported them. The suit is still going on. The United States, of course, is resisting being sued and trying to get it thrown out of court, because they're also suing us in this country. But keep in touch with that. So the humanitarian pledge, let me tell you a little about it, because this is another reason for hope. The petition you sign is only a first step, but it's a pledge that grew out of another reason for hope. The rest of the world is getting sick and tired of having 9 nuclear nations hold the rest of the world hostage and use their nuclear weapons to bully the rest of the old world. And so they've rebelled. 158 of the 193 members of the United Nations have signed a letter saying nuclear weapons must be banned. They're not banned now. Chemical weapons are banned. Biological weapons, we're still struggling to get rid of them all. But we're on the way. Nuclear weapons, no. The nuclear nations are hanging on to those weapons, and not only that, as I hope most of you know, they're rebuilding them. Every one of those 9 nations are either modernizing their weapons so they kill more accurately or safely, they say. How do you kill safely? And or wipe out populations. Or they're expanding their arsenal. Or doing both. Everyone. The United States is way in the lead, but also with Russia, France, Britain, the non-UN members, which don't belong to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Pakistan, India, and Israel, which are kind of outside the law, and North Korea, which has a tiny 6 weapons or so. We need to do things in our own city, own here. Once we start, there are many things we can do. One thing is the mayors are our best friends, elected officials in this country. They've issued a tremendous statement every year supporting the International Mayors for Peace, which is led by the mayor of Hiroshima and the mayor of Nagasaki. I have faith because I believe in us. We the people. We have the resources inside it. And so do the people of Japan and Russia and Iran. They're pushing for this. So please, let's all wake up and not go to sleep again until we have no nuclear weapons and no more wars.
Let me read a part of the message from the mayor of Hiroshima. It's dated today, August 6, 2015. This is not the whole letter, but this is a part of it. Mayors for Peace, an organization whose membership now exceeds 6,700 cities, and which the city of Hiroshima presides over, will steadfastly promote the movement, stressing the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and seeking to outlaw them. We will help strengthen international demand for the start of negotiations on a nuclear weapons convention with a goal of total abolition by 2020. Each of us will help determine the future of our human family. To make sure the tragedies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki never happen a third time, we hope that as many people as possible will communicate, think, and act together with the Habakusha for a peaceful world without nuclear weapons and without war. In closing, I extend my best wishes for the good health and happiness of all in attendance. Mayor Matsui Kazumi, City of Hiroshima, dated today. And also dated today, our own Senator Jeffrey Merkley says, today, the 70th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima, we join the Japanese people and our entire world in memorializing those who lost their lives and the millions of people impacted by the bombing there and at Nagasaki. To this day, we look back with sadness and remembrance. The great bonds and partnerships between the United States and Japan are a strong foundation for a bright future in which we can envision a world without nuclear threat. As we look to our future, let us not forget the lives that were lost or the lessons we've learned, and hope for a strong future. Jeffrey A. Merkley. We've remembered Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we are pledging our work for our shared futures. Thank you for remembering Grandma Sodong. Thank you, Michiko-san, and thank you, Auntie Carol. We revere you and your history. Now, may I ask you, how can we help? Oregon PSR President Dr. Susan Katz, Physicians for Social Responsibility Director Kelly Campbell, Zones Project 2015 Managers Dan Deman Handelman, and Shanteni, let's ask them, how can we help?